The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.
Dr. Farhad Montazeri conducts research in the field of child psychiatry at Yale Child Study Center. He completed a postdoctoral fellowship in the field of genetics at Yale University prior to his current affiliation with the Yale Child Study Center. His research is focused on network modeling of psychiatric disorders, especially autism and its related comorbidities like depression and anxiety. And so now I will turn it over to Dr. Montazeri.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Denise, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar and taking the time to listen to my talk. So my talk is today is about depression in autism spectrum disorder, and since the method that I use is network analysis, it's going to include some points from the way this type of analysis is done. So let's start. So the first question, actually the first answer, je pense donc je suis, which means I think so I exist, Descartes. And the point that I would like to extract from this sentence that makes this sentence so beautiful to me is that it's actually the reverse. If I don't think, then I do not exist. That is the importance of the thinking. Next slide, depression and autism. So you see our depressed autistic bird over there, and the overlap between the two phenomena, two psychopathologies. So the thing about them is, in brief, they are intertwined, and we were looking for any differences in ASD, autism spectrum disease. I will refer to it as ASD from now, versus general population. And the first question is there anything as depression in autism, any entity, any separate entity as depression in autism that is different than depression in general population? And is it distinct or not? That is the major question that we are going to be answering in this study and in this presentation that is based on that study. So as you see, the Mother Nature is not short of any colors or any designs in hiding things, and we will see. It looks to me, depression in autism looks to me as this little butterfly that I took her picture, and if you look, even these short streaks here, just like as if it's painted, like the leaves. It is exquisitely beautiful to me. So does this exist, or is it a leaf? So it depends on the approach. It actually exists. There are some differences in depression and its profile between autism and autistic patients and general population. So, excuse me. So, irritability, agitation, and compulsive behavior are more common in ASD and in depression in ASD. And there is a broad range of prevalence reported for depression in ASD patients. And the reason is, as I mentioned, overlapping symptomatology of autism and depression, being withdrawn, being unable to communicate as good as others, and socially interact with other people. This is like the definition of autism, and it is all of them also fit into the area of depression. So there is the other thing that makes it difficult to figure what is the exact prevalence of depression in autism is the difficulty in ascertaining mood symptoms in autism. And also, data are collected in the clinical setting in some studies and in other settings, like in general population in other studies. So they give different numbers. There is also variability in the instruments used to assess depression and autism, which further complicates the picture. And above all of this, there is difference in the studied population, specifically in terms of age and IQ. So this range, to be honest with you, after reviewing all the literature, is from 10% to 70%. But what we know is that, combining all this information together, depression is more prevalent in autistic patients than in general population. Okay. So first, let's talk about what we know about depression in ASD, which we mentioned as an intertwined, exactly like these colors, but separate. But this is exquisite. This is like the beauty of nature of Connecticut. If you had a chance to come here in autumn or in summer, you would see a lot of pictures, scenery that goes beyond excitation. It really excites me and elevates my mood. It elates me. Okay, this beauty of Mother Nature painting. Now, there's no risk factor, there's no consensus on the risk factor for depression in ASD. The following items are cited in different papers published in the literature: higher cognitive functioning, self-awareness of deficit that is also related to higher IQ, is also mentioned as a risk factor. Stressful life event, adolescence, quality of social relationship, especially in adolescence, and alexithymia, higher age. Each one of these is from a different study, so I have combined them all together to get a better picture of the whole set of risk factors, which one are more pronounced. Also, severity of the ASD symptoms is reported as a risk factor for depression in ASD. In teens, peer relationship issues is also cited. And one that is very important, and actually I would like to especially emphasize, is the abnormalities in emotion regulation that seems to be a risk factor, not only a risk factor for depression in autism, but also a link between the two based on unpublished analysis, and also genetic factors. Okay. And here we go. So this talk is basically, in of itself, is based on this paper that we published, Network Analysis of Behavior in Depression and Autism Realm, Interrelationships and Clinical Implications. And this paper was published online in 2019 and in print in 2020. And I would explain some of the findings and the way that we reached those findings, the methodology that we use to do this study. So the aim of our paper was to investigate the depressive profile and symptom interrelationship in individuals with ASD and comparing these aspects with larger general population sample of similar age and IQ range. We also aimed at exploring issues of typical, the very important issue of typical versus atypical. Is depression in autism typical or atypical? This is the next level. After we say that depression in autism is a separate entity, the next question is, what are the differences between the general population and the ASD patients? And if there is any difference, it means that depression, any significant depression, significant difference statistically, it means that depression is atypical in autism, excuse me. And then we also tried to investigate the potential role of gender as a variable affecting the depressive profile in ASD patients. We also tried to determine therapeutic targets for depression in ASD, and I will explain how our network models will help us do that. Our study had several advantages, which I would like to mention. One is sample size. We used a quite big control and case sample size. I will actually, it is like around 128 patients in the ASD group and more than 2,300 patients in the control group. And we used extensive assessment instrument, actually the gold standard in study of the autism, and also depression, especially in autism. In autism, as you know, for example, there is a questionnaire, there is an assessment tool that's called Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, and it's abbreviated as ADOS. That is the gold standard tool, and with proven reliability and accuracy in different populations. This is the tool that we use to assess the severity of depression, and in regards to the autism, we use the Revised Children's Anxiety and Depression Scale, or RCADS. This is the abbreviation. And this is also an established question, especially in children. We additionally use a multi-rater approach because RCADS has both a child version and a parent version, and we ask the subjects to fill the questionnaire themselves, and also their parents do it. So not to fill the questionnaire, basically to answer the questions, and the technician that prepared the results would enter it into the data set that we use for analysis. So all right. So to be able to explain our results, I need to do a brief introduction of what our methodology was. And the main technique that we use is a new technique, rather new technique in the field of what is called psychometrics, that is called network modeling or network analysis. And it gives us a new perspective on the phenomenon that is under study from a different perspective. So it basically sheds light on some hidden aspects and corners of these psychopathologies that is quite hard to, sometimes impossible to achieve from using other techniques. So what is network modeling? Network modeling is actually not limited to psychology. It has been used in different fields, and it actually can be used to study any phenomena. A network, in essence, it can be used to study any phenomenon, any composite phenomenon. Let me give you an example. So I will start with something that is quite far from autism, the solar system. So suppose a form of extraterrestrial intelligence comes to our corner of the world and tries to figure if there is a phenomenon here or not. He would obviously see several germs here, several masses, big masses, you know, all of these. And he obviously doesn't know what they're called, or if they are part of phenomenon or not. He doesn't know the name of the phenomenon that is the solar system, but he can understand one thing, and that is that a phenomenon, anything physical, is composite. So basically, he is looking at a composite phenomenon. And what makes these components to be part of a phenomenon is that they are related. If they are not related in any way, they are separate phenomena. So he does a very basic study and just checks he just sits in a certain spot, in a fixed spot, and measures the distance of any one of these masses and those little masses that orbit around them from this fixed point. And you know that that after doing that, for example, for 1 million times, you will have a data set that has several columns, each one of these germs. For example, Earth, another one germ, Moon, another germ, Jupiter, another one, and Kaiser ring, another one, and things like that. And the million objects in that, or millions of objects, are each one of them. So when he does these measurements for each one of these germs, again and again and again, he noticed that they are related, and they basically vary together. In other terms, when one goes further distant from that fixed point, the other one also goes further. In general, like combining all the 1 million assessments, maybe in just one single assessment, there is not a covariance. Let's just use this term. But overall, these objects covary together. And if he uses the same measurement unit, for example, inch, feet, I don't know, meter, light years, anything, then he would end up with a correlation between these germs. So this correlation is the essence of a network. Basically, if I want to picture a phenomenon like this, like the solar system, in terms of a network, I will end up with this. Something like this. This is basically not, just need to mention that it's not a correlational network, it's a social network, but in this specific case, the solar system, it can serve as a network similar to our networks, and which are correlational in essence, although we use partial correlational, but they are correlational in essence. And I chose this picture to show you some concepts. So there is something very central here. One of these small circles that we call nodes, and represent one of those germs and one of those masses. And there are lines between them that we call edges, and represent the correlation, or even better, the partial correlation between the two objects. The partial correlation is the same as correlation, but all other variables in the study, all other nodes are used as covariates and are factored out. So it is more pure. So this is the central one, which is definitely the sun. And everything is somehow a lot of things seems to be connected with edges to this one. For example, this cluster is another term that we are going to use. This cluster of objects, or this one, or this one. In each one of these clusters, there is a central one, and there are several other partially correlated objects that are connected to it, which are definitely, at this point, we can say they're the moons of that object. So this is each one of the center of these, each one of these clusters is a planet, and the periphery are the moons. And you see several of them, as you can see, and then there are other objects, like those rings of millions of stones and meteorites, and everything that comes and goes from in and out of our solar system, sometimes regularly, interestingly. This is basically a network view of a phenomenon called solar system. This exact same concept can be applied, for example, to autism. Now, you will not end up with something like this because we would rather, we would probably have like around at most like 10 to 20 variables in our questions about in questions like ADOS, for example. Each one of these variables are going to be a node, and the correlation between them, or these edges, or these lines, which in those cases they are different in terms of thickness, are going to be the edges and representative of the partial correlation between the two variables. Let me actually show you one real network of autism to be able to better explain this. So, as I said, this is not an autism network. It's just an illustration to again emphasize the concept of the node connected with edges. So this is, and this is what I was talking. This is the, we call it regularized partial correlation network. The term regularized is, in essence, means the correlations are, the partial correlations are, all of them are shrunken, and those that are the smallest are set to 0. And there are statistical reasons for that. I don't want to get into those complicated technical stuff. The concept is important for me to convey. So this is a regularized partial correlation network of the ADOS questionnaire in ASD patients. As you know, there are in ADOS we have 4 major domains: communication, social interaction, and restricted interest repetitive behavior, and imagination / creativity / play. That is the other one. So as we can see here, and actually in other questionnaires, for example, we also tested ADRI, etc. There is a very strong link between, strong correlation between the communication, interpersonal communication, and social interaction that form the core of the of this solar system and act as the sun here. They are central, they are important, because, for example, this social interaction, as you see, has the most number of edges, one strong one here, which is a strong partial correlation, and another one here. So this is the most central in this network, and actually our studies shows that social interaction is the most central in ASD. So let's advance a little bit, and the other study that I need to briefly explain is the hierarchical clustering analysis, which is technically is a way to investigate the correlation between these variables in another way. it doesn't work at the level of partial correlation, but at the level of correlation. But in essence, the results that it gives, if we use the same, what we call correlation matrix that has the correlation of all of these variables with each other to both of these studies, and this one is on the left side is a network model, which we also call Gaussian graphical model, and this one that is a hierarchical analysis, you will get the same thing. For example, here it shows that sadness. This is the network model of depression in ASD patients. Each one of them is one of the major signs of depression: fatigue, appetite change, and the sadness, restlessness, insomnia or sleep problem, energia or lack of energy, cognitive impairment, or having problem with concentration or other domains of cognition, or anhedonia, being unable to enjoy things. So here we see that, for example, worthlessness as sadness here on the right side in the clustering analysis are tightly related. In fact, we use the term distance, which I don't want to go in terms of, because these are like technical stuff. Just anything that goes, that is further down is more correlated, and anything that is linked together, for example, these three signs, fatigue, anhedonia, and cognitive impairment are rather comparable to a cluster in the network model. So what we see is sadness and worthlessness form a cluster and a strong correlation, and are rather central. Everything down here is central. The further down is the more central. Let's see sadness and worthlessness here. This is worthlessness, the green node, and sadness. As you can see, they form, it is as if they are kind of like separated in terms of the strength of their relationship from other nodes in the network. The other major relationship, and we can say core of the cluster, is between restlessness and no move, which is also corresponding here to this one, the hierarchical analysis. So this second analysis is done to confirm the first one, and which is the network analysis, and based on a common input that is the correlation matrix, and to give a synchronized view of the network. That is basically the first time this has been used in psychological literature, and we were the behind this concept. And you can check that in our papers. But I would go very briefly through each one 1 minute. Okay, let me see how much time we have. Okay, 35, we are good. All right. And well, you know, this study, the study that I showed you before, and is the basis of this talk, is actually just one ring in a chain of studies that we have done. Is the third ring in the chain of studies that we have done in investigating autism and its comorbidities in using network analysis and other innovative techniques. So the first, I will very quickly go through these. So it technically took us like 3 years to do this, more than 3 years, 4 years to do these 4 studies. I will summarize the first 2 in just 2 minutes. So the first one was network approach to autistic traits, group and subgroup analysis of ADAS item scores. So in simple terms, we just wanted to see what is the structure of autism using the ADAS questionnaire and its major domains in ASD patients using a network approach. And let's see what are the results. I will just show you one result. So ADAS has different modules for different levels of different ages, in fact, and there's different levels of verbosity for patients that cannot speak at all, patients that can speak just a few words, patients that can speak like more like sentences, and then the teenagers or people that can speak like routinely, regularly. So let's see, these are not partial correlational networks. We first started with correlational networks. These are more dense. There are more edges here compared to the partial correlation. But still, the concept of centrality here is evident. So, for example, if you see the module 1, which is 142 patients in this study, you will see that these green nodes, which are RRB, restricted interest, repetitive interest, repetitive behavior nodes, are form kind of like a cluster at one side of the network. They are rather peripheral. Then compare them with these red nodes, which are actually social interactions, and each one is one aspect. For example, you can see one is the bilateral, one is like a direct eye gaze, etc. Each one of them is one of the variables in the ADAS algorithm. These are more central, as you see, the red nodes. And then we have all these kind of purplish, excuse me, let me go back. Yeah, purplish nodes that are communication. And it seems like the communication nodes and the social interaction, the red ones, form like one cluster together. And on the other hand, which is more central, and there is this other cluster that is more peripheral. And this exists in other modules too. For example, this is module 3, at the center. The module 3 was on 197 patients. Again, not considering this node, the furthest, the most peripheral node, these other 3 green nodes, which are RRB nodes, form one cluster, and then the purple, which are interpersonal communication, and the red nodes, which are social interaction nodes, are the most central. In fact, social interaction seems to be even more central than the communication node. And the lowest one is the module 2, which is 138 patients, and again shows the same pattern. Let's see, like these 3 green nodes are peripheral, and the combination of these 2 color, the social and social interaction and interpersonal communication nodes are more central. More central means having more communications, and that's the reason they're placed in the center due to the layout of the network model. And having more communication means it has actually more central role in the pathology. Just like in our solar system, the most central node in that network we saw was the sun, which is the most influential node or or mass in our solar system, and could be just figured using a simple measurement several hundreds of thousands times. Here we can, using these separate measurements, so in this case it's not like 100,000 or a million times of measurements from a fixed point. It is 138 cases or measurements of the same variables. So they, again, we see the same pattern. Something is more central, which is this cluster, and more influential. And the importance of this is that theoretically, if we intervene at the level of these more central nodes, and for example, the social interaction deficits, which are these red nodes, then you will have better success, hypothetically, at treating the patient, and actually has been proven that this hypothesis works. The only thing is that there are a lot of different centrality measures. So everything in statistics is quantified. So the question is, which one is the most central? Which measurements we need to use? But considering all of the data, we can say that those that are more central in terms of all of these centrality measures are the most influential, and once a therapeutic intervention at their level is done, better therapeutic results are achieved. And therapeutic results, obviously, from our discussion, is the disintegration of this composite phenomenon, right? Just these correlation, these edges to disappear. So it means that the phenomenon of ASD doesn't exist anymore. It is just simply separated nodes that each one acts on its own, and they do not co-vary, they do not correlate, they do not partially correlate. All right. Let's go. The next slide. And this is another year, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Then we checked after checking the structure of autism from a network analysis viewpoint, we checked the structure of anxiety in autism spectrum disease, and which in classical terms it's called a comorbidity. And what we found, let me show you. This is these are, you see two networks on the left, and on the right there is another type of study, that is module preservation study, and in these are RCATS network. Each one are made of 6 modules. There is a questionnaire that assesses 4 anxiety disorders, like social phobia, like generalized anxiety disorder, like separation anxiety disorder, etc., and depression and obsessive compulsive disorder. Each one of these colors is the items of these questionnaires from one of these, what we call modules. The picture on the far left is the ASD cases, the 128 ASD cases, and then we have the general population cases. And what we, one thing that we figured is first, these anxiety questionnaire, this anxiety items, for example, here, this is social phobia. The blue one are social phobia. The orange one are general anxiety disorder. The red one are separate anxiety disorder, and the green one are panic disorder. So each one of them is one anxiety disorder, and you see that they're tightly clustered together because they are correlated together. And if we check the pattern of correlation of within each module, each one of these colors, between different nodes, across the two networks, which is the ASC network and general population network, and if it is the same, and the correlation of one module, the nodes within one module with all other nodes in the network is similarly follows the same pattern, then it is a preserved module. In other terms, it is typical. It works the same. It has the same correlation with other elements of the pathology of the anxiety and depression OSD group of pathologies in patients. And what we can say here is that look at these orange ones, like for example, these orange ones, and here in ASD patients, and the orange ones here. It seems like they follow the same pattern, you know. Like if you check the number 22 is connected to 27, here also 22 is connected to 27, and 27 is connected to 13, and here 27 is also connected to 13, and like this is just intramodular, and then its connection with other nodes, which is actually a very complicated technical analysis, which also includes permutation and getting z-scores and preservation, etc. But at the end, excuse me. But at the end, we would see the far right graph that is the result of this module preservation analysis of anxiety in depression. And you see that the GAD, the orange module, has the highest rank in terms of preservation. And the MD, the depression, which is the yellow one, has the lowest rank in terms of preservation. In other terms, it is as if anxiety is very well preserved, and it is the same in the ASD and general population in terms of correlation with other similar disorders. But the depression follows the exact opposite pattern, and you see in the general population network, the yellow ones are quite clustering together. But in the ASD, they're all over the place, you know, with the correlation with each other and with other nodes are totally disrupted. So this means that depression is atypical in ASD patients, is different, it follows a different pattern. So this study was done for our second paper, and was what was triggering the next analysis, which is the current analysis that I would talk about. So finally, we would go to the current analysis, and we used the RCATS questionnaire, which has, as I said in the previous figure, 6 module, and a sample size of 126, I said 28, that was a mistake, 126 ASD patients, and 2,230 patients in the general population group. And for example, let me show some of our results. This is the average score of each one of the questions related to depression in the RCAT questionnaire in the ASD group, in those 126 patients. And you can see that, you know, in almost any of them, so the autism group is the red one, and the blue one is the general population. Is higher in the autism group, and especially higher, much higher mean in ASD group compared to the general population group is something like a sleep trouble, like this one. You see the difference is the biggest, or restlessness, the difference is the biggest. And this kind of points us towards the major finding of the study, that restlessness and sleep disorder seems to be much more prominent in the ASD patients in the depression compared to the general population group. And even though this is not a network analysis graph, but even this simple graph shows that next we will go to this one I just showed you. I will show it again. You know, the depression, the yellow one, is the least preserved module among the 6, among the depression, social phobia, panic disorder, separation anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. And generalized anxiety disorder is best preserved, or the similar among the two groups. This is another result of the study. Next is the network of depression based on the items of RCAT, items of depression in RCAT in a general population and in the ASD group. And we see here that there are significant differences. Actually, now there are methods devised that quantify exactly these differences, whether they exist or not. But at the time of this study, they were not fully introduced. But still, we can see that, for example, in the ASD group, let me see, for example, cognitive impairment, which is one of the lowest, actually the lowest one in both upper and higher panel hierarchical clustering analysis dendrograms. We call these figures dendrograms, and therefore has, let me see, but it's actually more, it's actually lower, or in ASD patients, compared to the cognitive impairment in the general population. So it is as if it is more pronounced. The same is for restlessness. And here it's lower, it's more central, it's more highly correlated with cognitive impairment, while here in the general population, we see that restlessness does not cluster with cognitive impairment, but instead with no move. So obviously there are differences. And the main difference is that the restlessness and sleep disorder, what we can at least is follows quite different patterns in these two networks. And as I said, each one of these results of hierarchical clustering analysis on the right exactly follows the result of the regularized partial correlation models on the left. So you can see, for example, no move and restlessness here, and here is no move and restlessness. You know, they are connected with a very strong edge and form kind of like a core of a cluster. So next. We also did another analysis. We put all the this orange one, the depression node, and the green ones, the ASD nodes, and also the anxiety nodes of the RCADs with the blue ones, which one is panic disorder, social phobia, separation anxiety, and general anxiety disorder. And as you can see, these two seems to be separated, but in the depression network and the ASD network. But when we check the dendrogram, the RRB, which is the restricted interest-restricted behavior module of the ASD, actually clusters is included in this cluster with all these different depression and anxiety items, and separate from its parent. It's actually like kind of colleague nodes in the depression in the ASD pathology, which is social interaction and communication and imagination, creativity in ADAS questionnaire. This triggered our current study, which we will go through and which we will hopefully go through in maybe another talk. And let's check the time. Okay, it seems I am out of time. And that was basically the conclusion of the study. So okay. I truly appreciate everybody listening to my talk, and I'm sorry that I went over time. Now back to you, Denise, if you have any questions.
Yes, we've gotten some questions, and don't worry about the time. That's completely fine. Yeah, not a problem at all. If there was anything else, was there anything else you wanted to say before we go to questions?
No, that's basically it. I think I think this is the best you can get when you try to summarize 4 years of work in 1 hour. So hopefully I didn't confuse the audience, and rather removed some of the confusions regarding the depression in autism.
Right, it's fascinating. I know I myself am a parent, so I've got friends and have known individuals on the spectrum, obviously people who are not on the spectrum who experience depression as well. But it's very interesting to see the prevalence and how that may be affecting individual patients, and something that may be missed.
Correct.
Right. So there were some questions. This one is a little, I'll admit, over my head, but I think you'll understand what they're saying.
Sure.
The person says, great idea about describing autism behaviors with maps, nodes, and clusters. Have you tried to compare them with maps of gene networks? Different groups creating connections between genes or receptors in ASD brain, for example, the Grail tool.
That's actually one of my next projects, and that would be an extremely interesting study. So technically, there must be correlations between ASD as a whole and ASD modules like RRB, like communication, social behavior, social interaction with certain genes, which could be derived from genomic analysis and the whole genome sequencing, and with the expression profile of these genes. That would be a fascinating study that I would be more than happy to do as one of my next projects. You know, I always have a ton of projects in my mind, so time and some other factors are a little bit limiting me, and I kept my enthusiasm. But I would, that idea is excellent, and I have thought about it, and I have researched about it, and I think I will do it, yes.
Okay, and have there been any specific examples where the analysis on diagnosis and treatment of specific patients has been used? So have you seen this research applied directly at this point, or is it all?
Not at the field of ASD, but there have been researchers in other fields, but there hasn't been a major study, for example, partitioning the patients into cases which receive an intervention at the level of the most central node, which is the social interaction, compared to those that receive an intervention at the most peripheral node, that is RRB nodes, and then comparing the result. It would be an amazing study, but it hasn't been done. Let me just tell you one thing, that this field, the whole field of network modeling in psychology, or psychometrics as they have called it, is just a few years old, less than a decade old. And we have the, actually, I mean, I and other members of the team have the most number of papers in this field, and we're one of the first groups that started to study this field, to apply network analysis to this field. And definitely we have a lot in mind to do, and this would also be a very interesting idea. Just talking about this, I remember that I didn't go through very quick through the acknowledgement slide, that I would do it right now. Okay, so I need to appreciate the help of Dr. George Anderson in Child Study Center, with whom I have been collaborating for more than 6 years. Dr. Fred Wolkmar, I think a lot of people know him. He is a world-renowned psychologist, especially in the field of ASD, and has helped me a lot in that center. Dr. Annelies de Wild and Dr. Vera Dekker from Netherlands that help us write the papers, and obviously you yourself, Denise Fulton, and I appreciate your help too. Now I'm ready for more questions.
Okay, well, we've got time for just one more. People are asking about if they would like to participate in future research. So if they have students or individuals with autism. Do you enroll openly there at Yale at the Child Study Center?
So I am working with one of the faculty over there, Dr. George Anderson, and we basically work on the data sets that are the result of other projects, and we do not work directly with patients, but there are many more people. And if you just contact the Child Study Center at Yale, if you can just Google it, Yale Child Study Center, and contact the administrators there, they will put you in contact with people that are conducting research directly on patients.